The very minute she signed her divorce papers, she cancelled 15 credit cards in her ex-husband's name, at the exact time he was booking a lavish engagement party for his mistress. But then, a single sentence from the event planner froze him in his tracks. The divorce papers sat in front of her like a contract with fate, sealed and final. Aria Wells took a deep breath, feeling a weight she had carried for so many years slowly lift from her chest. It was done. Her marriage to Damon Harris, the man who had promised her everything and delivered nothing but betrayal, was finally over. The court had declared it, and now, in the cold, sterile hallway of the courthouse, Aria was left to process what had been taken from her. As she walked out of the courthouse, the late afternoon sun hit her face, and for the first time in years, she felt the warmth of freedom. Her heart, though heavy, was also light. She could breathe again. It wasn't the end of her life. It was the beginning of something she had long since given up on, a life she could finally live for herself. But even as she stood there, trying to grasp the enormity of what had just transpired, a black car screeched to a halt in front of her. Damon. He didn't even glance in her direction. He was in a hurry. His eyes were focused on the road ahead, and beside him, sitting in the passenger seat, was the young woman in the pink coat. The woman he had spent the last year secretly meeting, spending the money he'd siphoned off from their joint account. Aria's chest tightened for a second as she saw them drive off, but it wasn't anger that washed over her. It was something else, relief, maybe. She felt a strange sense of calm that she hadn't expected. For so long, she had been swallowed by the idea of losing him, even though he'd been lost to her a long time ago. But now, in this moment, there was clarity. Damon was no longer her problem. He had made his choice, and now, it was her turn to make hers. With a determined step, she pulled out her phone and opened the banking app. Damon had asked her, years ago, to get the supplementary credit cards, and without thinking twice, she'd given him 15, one for himself, one for his sister, a few for his friends, even a couple for his business associates. She had trusted him, believed in him, and, like a fool, had let him ruin her financially while he secretly bought his mistress designer handbags and fancy dinners. But not anymore. Not today. As her fingers hovered over the screen, she hesitated for only a second before tapping "cancel" on the first card. She heard the beep, and then, the message appeared on the screen: supplementary card successfully cancelled. Her heart skipped a beat. There it was. One step taken. And then another. One by one, she cancelled every single card, his family's, the ones he'd used to drain her resources. Ping, ping, ping. Each notification felt like a victory, a moment of power. With each card she cancelled, she was not only cutting ties with the financial mess Damon had left her in, but she was also severing the last remnants of the emotional chains he had used to keep her tethered to a life of lies. She was free. When the last card was cancelled, her phone buzzed with a message from Tasha. Guess what? Damon is booking a $75,000 engagement party for his new girl. His exact words. It has to be big, it has to be grand. Aria smiled. Perfect timing. As Damon was out there, planning his future with a woman who had no idea what kind of man he really was, Aria was taking control. She put her phone back in her bag, pulled her coat tighter around her, and headed home. The walk felt lighter than it ever had before. It wasn't just the weight of the papers in her bag, or the cards she had cancelled. It was the weight of 2 decades of a relationship that had finally been put to rest. When she got home, there was an unsettling knock on the door. Leah, Damon's sister, the last person she wanted to see. Open up. Open this door right now. Leah shouted from the other side. Leah had found out. Damon had tried to use the cards and failed, and now, of course, it was Aria's fault. Her ex-husband and his family were experts at manipulation, but Aria was done being their punching bag. She wiped her hands on a towel, walked to the door, but didn't open it immediately. Instead, she asked, her voice calm but firm, "Who is it?" "It's me, Leah." The voice came through, impatient, demanding. Aria opened the door, and Leah stormed in, not even waiting to be invited. She threw her shiny handbag onto the couch. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Leah demanded. "You can't just cancel those cards. Damon is in a mess right now because of you. Do you realize that? Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" Aria crossed her arms. She wasn't going to back down. "Yes, I cancelled them. So what? Leah's face turned red with fury. You've ruined everything. You've made him look like a fool in front of his new girl. You've embarrassed him. Arya, looking at her ex-sister-in-law with disgust, said coolly, Damon's been embarrassing himself long before today. What did you expect from someone who's been using my credit to buy his mistress $3,500 handbags? Leah's face froze. She didn't know what to say. Arya wasn't done. Let me remind you of something. These cards were in my name. I'll cancel them whenever I want. And I did. It's my money, my decision. If Damon wanted to keep using them, maybe he should have been honest for once. Leah's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Arya wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever again. As Arya sat back down, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Damon. You've made a huge mistake. I'm going to make you regret this. Arya's heart raced. This was just the beginning. She could feel the storm coming, but this time, she wasn't afraid. What did Damon really have planned? Would his threats finally be enough to break her? Subscribe now to see how Arya outsmarts Damon and reclaims everything she lost. You won't believe what happens next. Arya Wells leaned against the windowsill, watching the city outside come alive as the sun dipped below the horizon. The vibrant glow of the setting sun felt like a stark contrast to the storm that had raged inside her for years. For so long, she had been trapped in the cycle of self-sacrifice, trying to hold her marriage together while the pieces of her soul slowly chipped away. 2 decades, 20 years of loyalty, love, and patience, only to be left with betrayal and emptiness. Her mind wandered back to the early days of their marriage. Damon Harris, so charming, so full of promise. He had been everything she ever wanted. She remembered the way he had looked at her, the way he promised her the world. They were a team, or at least, that's how it had seemed. The dream of a perfect life, a beautiful home, a family, and a love that would last forever. But somewhere along the way, Damon had changed. It wasn't just the little things, the late nights at the office, the missed anniversaries, it was the coldness that had crept into his eyes, the distance that had become a permanent fixture between them. Arya had tried, oh how she had tried. She had been the one to give everything, to compromise, to stay silent when the world crumbled around her. For Damon, she had given up her own dreams, swallowed her own desires, and sacrificed her happiness. She had always told herself that it was worth it because this was the life they had built together. But was it really worth it? Arya thought back to the times when she had questioned his loyalty. When she had come home early from work and found him, not in their living room, but out, with her. The mistress who had slowly but surely carved out a place in Damon's life while Arya had continued to carry the weight of everything else. She'd turned a blind eye, convinced herself that things would change, that the man she had married wasn't lost forever. But how could she have been so blind? The signs had been there, scattered like breadcrumbs in front of her eyes, and yet she had refused to see them. It was that one moment, the day she caught him, that cracked her open. It was the day her world shattered into pieces. She had walked in on them, Damon with his arms wrapped around his mistress, laughing as though the years they had spent together meant nothing. That day, her heart had been broken into so many pieces that it felt impossible to piece them back together. But, in the pit of her despair, Arya had made a choice. She would no longer be a victim. She looked down at her hands, the ones that had always been there to clean up his messes, to carry the burden of their family's life. Her hands were shaking, but it wasn't from fear. No, it was from something else, a deep, quiet fury that had been building up inside her for years. It was time for her to take back control. Instead of retreating into sadness, Arya chose something different. She chose to live for herself. For the first time in a long time, she looked inward. The woman she had been, dependent, docile, always sacrificing for others, was no longer who she wanted to be. That woman was gone, and the woman who stood in her place was stronger, wiser, and ready to take on whatever life threw at her. The moment she had signed those divorce papers had been the moment of no return. She could almost hear the click of the lock, the sound of her past finally closing behind her. Damon, his family, their lies, they were no longer her burden to carry. She would walk away from them. Arya stood up, her reflection in the glass staring back at her. The woman she saw wasn't the broken wife who had silently suffered, but a woman who had reclaimed her life. A woman who would no longer settle for the scraps Damon had left behind. She felt it in her bones. This was the start of her new life. The life that she would live for herself. Arya turned away from the window, a fierce resolve forming in her chest. She wasn't going to let Damon's betrayal define her. She wasn't going to let the mistakes of her past hold her back any longer. It was time for her to rise. To become the woman she was always meant to be. She had spent years being the silent supporter, the dutiful wife, the one who always put others first. But now, it was time to take care of herself. Arya knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. She still had to deal with the messy aftermath, Damon, his mistress, his family, but none of them could touch her anymore. Arya walked over to her bag, pulled out the folder with the divorce papers, and stared at the thick stack of documents. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a declaration of independence. She smiled, the first real smile she had felt in years, as she realized that, for the first time in a long time, she was free. But little did Arya know, this was only the beginning. Damon would not take this lying down. He would fight back, and Arya would have to dig deep, far deeper than she ever had before, to ensure that she didn't fall back into the trap that had held her for so long. Could she stand strong against the storm that Damon would surely unleash? Would she have the strength to continue moving forward and never look back? The fight had only just begun. Arya's phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't a message from Tasha. It was from Damon. You think you've won? This isn't over. You're going to regret this. Arya felt her heart race. What would he do next? What lengths would he go to in order to get what he wanted? But Arya had already decided, she would no longer let him control her. Will Arya's newfound strength be enough to survive Damon's wrath, or is there more danger lurking around the corner? Subscribe now and stay tuned, because the real fight is just beginning. You won't want to miss what happens next. The sound of her phone buzzing broke the silence that had settled over Arya's apartment. She glanced at the screen, Tasha. Without a second thought, she swiped to answer, pressing the phone to her ear. Arya, you won't believe this. Damon's at it again. Tasha's voice was practically vibrating with energy. Arya felt her pulse quicken. It had been a few days since she'd made the choice to walk away from Damon, and since then, things had felt different. She'd cancelled the credit cards, started moving forward, but this new development could change everything. What now? Arya's voice was calm, betraying none of the tension that was slowly creeping into her chest. I'm at the boutique, and one of my regulars, she's an event coordinator at this luxury hotel, just told me Damon's booking the engagement party with his mistress. You know, the one for that $75,000 event. He was insisting it had to be grand. He's out there, planning his future while you're left dealing with the aftermath of everything he took from you. What are you going to do, Arya? Tasha's words hit Arya like a slap. The anger bubbled up, rising from the pit of her stomach. She clenched her fists, the muscles in her arms tightening. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. This wasn't just about Damon and his lies. This was about justice. It was about her taking control of the life that had been taken from her. Arya's gaze shifted to the stack of paperwork sitting on the counter, the divorce decree, the cancelled credit card statements. It was all part of her new beginning, a clean slate. But Damon had taken something far more valuable than money. He had taken her trust, her respect, her sense of self, and now, Arya was going to take it back. I'm going to make sure Damon feels every bit of the humiliation he's put me through, Arya said quietly, but there was a fire in her voice that wasn't there before. She could already feel the shift inside her, the calmness of a woman who had decided that enough was enough. Tasha's voice softened. What are you thinking, Arya? I'm going to hit him where it hurts, Arya replied. I'll make sure that engagement party he's so proud of crumbles right in front of him. It's the perfect moment to reclaim everything he stole from me. Arya's mind began to work methodically, the way it always did when she had a plan. The first step was already clear. Damon had used her credit cards to finance his secret life with his mistress. The things he bought for her, the lavish gifts, the trips, the jewelry, he had used Arya's money without her knowledge or consent. With her heart racing, Arya walked over to the table, picking up her phone. She had already cancelled all but one of the cards, the ones linked to Damon's indulgences, and now it was time to finish the job. It wasn't just about the money, it was about sending a message. Her fingers moved with a sense of purpose, the steady pressure of her thumb pressing against the cancel button for the final card, the one he used most frequently. The confirmation screen popped up, and Arya didn't hesitate for a moment. She pressed yes. The screen flashed, the words card cancelled successfully, staring back at her. It was over. Arya put the phone down on the table and closed her eyes for a moment. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long suddenly felt a little lighter. It wasn't just the cards she had cancelled. It was the chains of her past, the guilt, the years of sacrifice and betrayal. It was all gone now. The sound of her phone buzzing again jolted her back to the present. It was Tasha. Did you do it? Tasha's voice was filled with excitement, but also a bit of awe. Done, Arya replied, her voice calm, but with an edge. Now, we deal with Damon. I love it. I knew you had it in you, Tasha said, and Arya could practically hear the grin in her voice. But don't stop there. You have more to take back from him than just credit cards. You've got this. Arya smiled, the first real smile in a long time. It felt like the first step toward the woman she was finally ready to become. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As Arya sat back, feeling the weight of her decision, the phone buzzed once more. But this time, it wasn't Tasha. It was Damon. His name on the screen sent a chill through her. You've made a mistake, Arya. His voice, cold and threatening, filled her with a new resolve. This isn't over. I'll make you regret this. Arya felt a surge of adrenaline. It was finally happening. Damon was about to learn that messing with Arya Wells wasn't something he could do and walk away from. But what exactly was he going to do? Would he fight back with everything he had left? Could Arya face whatever storm Damon had planned for her next? Arya took a deep breath, staring at the screen. The battle had just begun. Subscribe now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. The storm is coming, and Arya's going to make sure Damon feels it. Arya had just settled onto the couch, the warmth of the afternoon sun spilling through the windows as she tried to soak in the peace she had fought for. The past few days had been a whirlwind of decisions, but today was quiet. Today was her moment to breathe. Or so she thought. The loud, incessant banging on her front door shattered the calm. Arya's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly who it was. The sound was unmistakable, Leah. She could already feel the anger bubbling beneath her skin. Leah, Damon's sister, had always been a thorn in her side. The woman who had never seen Arya's loyalty, but expected it all the same. Arya walked slowly toward the door, the weight of the confrontation settling in. This wasn't going to be easy. But it was necessary. Macaw, open up. Leah's voice screamed from the other side, high-pitched with impatience. Arya's hand rested on the door handle, but she didn't open it immediately. She'd been through too much with Damon and his family to let this moment pass without a reminder that she was done being their doormat. Who is it? Arya called back, her voice steady, but filled with the quiet resolve that had been building inside her for days. Don't act dumb. Open the door. Leah shot back, her voice rising in anger. Arya rolled her eyes, drawing in a slow breath before turning the knob and pulling the door open just wide enough to see Leah's flushed face. Leah stood there, a flash of rage in her eyes, her expensive outfit and overly done makeup doing nothing to mask the venom in her voice. You think you can just cancel the cards and get away with it? Leah snapped, pushing past Arya before she could say a word. You have no right to do this. Arya stood there, still as a rock, letting Leah's anger wash over her. She was a storm of fury, but Arya didn't budge. This wasn't about cards anymore. It was about control. It was about her taking back her life. Get out of my house, Leah, Arya said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You don't get to dictate what happens here anymore. Leah stepped closer, her hands trembling with rage. I'm not going anywhere, Macaw. You've made a huge mistake. She pointed a finger at Arya. You have no idea what this is going to cost you. Damon's furious. He's got a lot of power, and you'll be sorry. Arya's gaze remained cold. Damon's not the one with the power here, Leah. She reached for the folder she'd kept all these months, the one with all the evidence. The original contracts for the cards, proof of her ownership, the receipts for all the transactions Damon had so carelessly made. Arya opened it slowly, taking out a sheet of paper and holding it up to Leah. This is my name, Arya said, her finger pointing to the clear wording. I am the primary cardholder. These cards were issued to Damon, to you, and all of his friends, but that doesn't change the fact that it's my name on the line. Leah's face turned red as she snatched the paper from Arya's hand. She stared at it, her eyes narrowing. You think you can just throw everything away like this? You don't even care about Damon, about family. You're doing this out of spite. Arya shook her head, her jaw set firm. I'm not doing it out of spite, Leah. I'm doing it because Damon took everything from me. My trust, my respect, my loyalty. She stepped closer to Leah, not flinching. And what did I get in return? His betrayal, his lies, and the constant humiliation of his family expecting me to just give and give. Leah stepped back, clearly taken aback by Arya's words. She blinked, trying to regain her composure, but Arya wasn't finished. You think I don't know what's going on, Leah? Arya's voice dropped to a cold whisper. You think I'm the one who's going to be sorry for this? No, you're the one who's going to regret this. She pointed to the evidence on the table. It's all here, and if you think I'll back down, think again. Damon won't walk away from this unscathed. Not this time. Leah's anger flared up once more. You're a fool, Macaw, she shouted, her voice echoing in the hallway. You think you can just take everything from Damon and his family? You're the one who's going to lose. You'll be all alone, just like before. Arya's heart pounded, but her stance remained unwavering. I've been alone before, Leah. And I survived. I don't need Damon or his family to survive. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of her words sink in. I'm not scared anymore. You'll see. Leah turned on her heel, storming out the door. But as she passed by, she shot Arya one last look. You'll regret this. We all will. Arya watched her leave, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the hallway. But she wasn't shaking. She wasn't afraid. Arya had finally found her voice, and there was no going back now. As Arya closed the door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her stomach sinking as she saw Damon's name on the screen. You've made a huge mistake, Arya. His voice was cold, dripping with malice. You think you can cancel the cards and get away with it? You don't know what's coming. Arya's fingers tightened around the phone. This was just the beginning. The war had only just begun. What does Damon have planned for her? And will Arya finally get the justice she deserves? Hit subscribe to stay tuned because this fight isn't over yet, and you don't want to miss what happens next. The doorbell rang, breaking the peaceful stillness that had settled over Arya's home. She froze, the faintest wave of dread washing over her. Clara, her mother-in-law, was never a welcome visitor. She had always had a way of making Arya feel small, insignificant, as though everything Arya did was always wrong, always beneath her expectations. Arya had hoped, prayed even, that after the divorce, she would never have to deal with Clara again. But here she was. The sound of her heels clicking against the floor grew louder, and within seconds, Arya could hear Clara's unmistakable voice from the other side of the door. Macaw, open up. It's me, Clara, she called, her tone tight with the kind of superiority Arya had grown all too familiar with. Arya took a deep breath, composing herself. She wouldn't back down now. Not after everything that had happened, not after everything Damon had taken from her. But what could Clara possibly want? The thought gnawed at her. With a heavy heart, Arya opened the door. Clara stood there, her arms crossed over her chest, a stern look on her face. The moment she stepped inside, she glanced around, inspecting the space as though she were the queen of the house. Nothing was ever good enough for Clara. I thought we could talk, dear, Clara said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You know, family is everything. Arya didn't flinch. She stepped back and gestured toward the couch. Let's talk. But know that I'm not changing my mind about the cards. Clara took a seat, immediately launching into her usual speech about family, loyalty, and the importance of understanding. But Arya was done with understanding. It had gotten her nowhere for 20 years. All it had brought her was betrayal, exhaustion, and resentment. You've got to let go of this bitterness, Macaw, Clara began, her voice softening, as if she could sway Arya with her kind words. I know things haven't been perfect, but you've got to think about Damon. He's struggling right now. He's trying to start fresh. You're tearing the family apart. Arya's chest tightened. The words Clara spoke were familiar, all too familiar. Be understanding. That was the mantra of Damon and his family. The one that had kept her tied to a sinking ship for far too long. But today, Arya wasn't going to be manipulated. I'm not tearing anything apart, Clara. Arya's voice was calm but firm. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life. I'm taking back what's mine. Clara's eyes widened, and she quickly stood up, her posture brimming with righteous indignation. You can't do this. You can't just destroy everything Damon has worked for. Think of the embarrassment this will cause him. She raised her voice. And you, what about your family? Don't you want things to be normal again? Arya's heart pounded. Normal? That was exactly what she had been chasing for years, a life of normalcy, under the thumb of Damon's lies and deceit. But normal had never meant anything to her. It had been about pretending, about surviving. Today, she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. Arya crossed her arms, meeting Clara's gaze with a quiet, unwavering strength. Damon didn't think about normal when he cheated on me with that woman. He didn't think about family when he took over $75,000 of our marital assets and spent it all on her. She shook her head slowly. He didn't think about me at all. Clara recoiled as though Arya had struck her. How dare you speak about him like that? She took a step closer, eyes flashing with outrage. You have no idea what it's like to be in his shoes. He's trying to build a life with someone new. You think he's just going to sit around, letting you control everything? Arya could feel her old fear rising in her chest, but she didn't allow it to overtake her. Not today. Not anymore. She wasn't the woman who had silently endured for years. She was stronger. You don't get it, Clara. I've spent 20 years being everything he wanted me to be. I took care of him. I gave him everything, even when he didn't deserve it. I worked hard, I sacrificed, I loved him with everything I had. Her voice cracked for a moment, but she steadied herself. But he didn't love me back. Clara's face twisted with contempt, but Arya didn't flinch. You should have thought about that before you went behind my back, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Before you used my credit to fund your little fantasy life with her. Clara's mouth opened, but no words came out. For a brief moment, there was only the silence between them, one that Arya had earned. One that finally allowed her to say what had been inside her for far too long. You're right about one thing, Clara, Arya said quietly. I am destroying everything. I'm destroying the life I built for him, the life that you and his family always expected me to hold together while he destroyed everything in sight. I'm not doing it for vengeance. I'm doing it because I refuse to live in his shadow anymore. Clara's face paled. The anger in her expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of something that might have been guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She wasn't ready to accept that Arya wasn't the same woman anymore. You can't do this. You just can't. Clara's voice was a plea now. You'll regret it, Macaw. Damon won't let this go. He's going to make your life miserable. Arya stepped back, taking a moment to breathe, to calm herself. She wasn't afraid anymore. I've already lived through the worst of it, Clara. I've already lived through the misery. Now, I'm going to live for myself. Clara opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Arya turned on her heel and headed for the door. You can't guilt me into this anymore. Don't come back here unless you're willing to see the woman I've become. As Arya stood at the door, ready to close it, Clara's voice rang out one last time, pleading. You think you've won? She called. Damon won't forgive you for this. He'll make sure you regret this for the rest of your life. Arya's hand hovered over the door. Could Damon really do what he threatened? Was this truly the end of her battle, or just the beginning of something even darker? What happens next could change everything. Will Arya's newfound strength be enough to take back what's rightfully hers? Or will Damon's threats push her to the breaking point? Click subscribe to find out what happens next, because the fight for her future is far from over. The phone buzzed on the coffee table. Arya glanced at the screen, her heart skipping for a brief moment. Damon. It had been less than 24 hours since the last confrontation. She had braced herself for this. She had known this was coming, the first of many calls, each designed to break her down, to make her feel guilty for the decisions she'd finally made. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. But no, she needed to hear him, to face the consequences of her actions. She picked up the phone and swiped to answer. Arya, his voice came through sharply, the familiar bitterness clear even through the phone. What the hell do you think you're doing? His words came out in a rush, laden with fury. Arya took a deep breath, leaning back in her chair. She wasn't afraid. She had nothing to fear anymore. You've ruined me. His voice was thick with accusation. You've cancelled all the cards, and now, I can't even make a simple payment for the engagement party. He let out a harsh laugh, one laced with the bitterness of years spent avoiding responsibility. What the hell do you think you're doing? Arya closed her eyes for a second, taking in the anger in his voice. She'd expected this. She knew the threats were coming, just like they always had. This was his game, intimidation, manipulation. He thought he could control her. He thought he could make her feel sorry for him, make her take the blame for everything that went wrong. But not today. I'm not ruining you, Damon. You did that all on your own. Arya's voice was steady, unshaken. She wasn't going to let his venom seep into her. You've been living a lie, and I'm not going to fund your lies anymore. Her words came out coolly, each one carefully measured, like a sharp blade cutting through his bluster. On the other end of the line, Damon was silent for a moment. Arya could practically hear him seething. She knew he didn't like being confronted, especially not by her. It had always been easier for him to walk all over her, to have her running around after him, cleaning up his mess. But not anymore. He broke the silence with an angry hiss. You think this is over? His words were low, dangerous. You've made a huge mistake. This isn't just about credit cards. You've crossed a line. Arya could feel her pulse quicken. She wasn't worried, but his threats, his attempts to control her, were getting more desperate. She knew what he was capable of. And yet, she wasn't scared. Not anymore. I've made plenty of mistakes, Damon, Arya said softly, her voice steady but cold. But letting you walk all over me wasn't one of them. You're the one who crossed the line, not me. She paused, waiting for his response, watching the time tick by in the corner of her phone. He was waiting for her to back down. But she wasn't going to. She wasn't going to let him win this time. You think you're going to get away with this? His voice cracked with anger, rising in volume as if he believed yelling would make him more convincing. I'll make sure you regret this. You'll never see the last of me. Arya's heart didn't flutter. Her breathing didn't change. He was all talk. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Damon. Her words cut through the tension, clear and strong. I've spent 20 years letting you dictate my life, letting you manipulate me into thinking I owed you something. She took a breath, steadying herself. She wasn't backing down. But I don't owe you anything anymore. She let those words hang in the air, not giving him a chance to respond. The only thing I owe myself now is the chance to live for me. He laughed, but it wasn't the same. It was hollow, almost desperate. You think you can just walk away from all of this? From everything we built together? He spit the words out like venom. You'll see. The truth will come out. I'll make sure it does. Arya shook her head, standing up and walking toward the window. She looked out at the world she was about to reclaim, the world that had been hers all along but had been lost to the manipulations of a man who thought he could break her. Not anymore. Let me tell you something, Damon. Arya's voice was steady, calm, almost too calm. This is just the beginning. I've spent too many years being afraid of you, being afraid of what you'd do. She took a breath, letting her words sink in. But not anymore. I'm done being your pawn. I'm done playing by your rules. The line was silent for a long moment, and for the first time, Arya felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was her moment. She wasn't going to let him or anyone else take it from her. So, go ahead, Damon. Threaten me. Arya's words were slow, deliberate. Do whatever you think you need to do. But know this, she paused for a moment, making sure he was listening, really listening. I'm not scared anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Damon was angry, sure. But he didn't know how to respond. Because she wasn't afraid anymore. Finally, Damon spoke, but this time his voice was less sure, less angry. You're making a big mistake, Arya. Arya smiled, but there was no joy in it, only the cold satisfaction of knowing that she was finally standing up for herself. No, Damon, she replied, her voice soft but firm. You're the one who made the mistake. She hung up before he could respond, feeling a sense of finality settle over her. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But she had made the first move. But as Arya set the phone down, her chest still tight from the confrontation, a sense of unease crept over her. She knew Damon wouldn't let this go. He would find a way to strike back, to make her regret this. But for the first time, Arya didn't feel powerless. She felt free. However, just when she thought the storm had passed, the doorbell rang. Who could it be now? Is this the calm before the storm, or is something much darker coming for Arya? You won't want to miss what happens next. If you think Arya's fight for her freedom is just beginning, hit that subscribe button. Because the war is far from over. Arya sat nervously in the waiting room, her fingers anxiously tapping on the armrest. The walls were lined with dark wood and framed legal diplomas, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in her heart. She'd never imagined it would come to this, sitting in a lawyer's office, seeking help to reclaim what was rightfully hers. This wasn't the life she had planned. But it had been forced upon her. Damon had taken so much from her, not just financially, but emotionally. The anger, the deceit, the endless lies. And now, she was fighting back. No longer the docile woman who had let him walk all over her, she was now the one taking charge of her own future. Beside her, Tasha's comforting presence was a reminder that Arya didn't have to do this alone. Tasha had been her rock through this whole ordeal, offering unwavering support even when things seemed impossible. And today was a pivotal day. Finally, the door opened, and the lawyer, a calm and collected man in his mid-40s, stepped into the room. His sharp suit contrasted with the warm, welcoming demeanor he exuded, making him seem both professional and approachable at the same time. "Arya Wells?" he asked, his voice firm but friendly. "Yes," Arya answered, standing up with a slight nod. Her nerves were steadying now, she had come this far. There was no turning back. "Please, come in. I've reviewed your case from the documents you sent." He motioned for them to follow him into his office. Arya and Tasha entered, the door clicking shut behind them. The lawyer gestured to the chair across from his desk. He took a seat behind the desk and gestured for Arya to do the same. "Now," he said, as he opened a file on his desk, "let's go through everything you've gathered." Arya slid the folder across the table. Inside were pages of receipts, bank statements, and even a few screenshots of her text messages with Damon's mistress. Every page was a reminder of how deep the betrayal ran. But it was also a testament to Arya's determination to not let Damon get away with what he'd done. The lawyer picked up the first receipt, his expression focused as he examined it. "I see you've done your homework." He glanced at Arya, then at Tasha, before continuing, "These documents are solid evidence. You've gathered everything you need to build a strong case." Arya felt a small sense of relief. She hadn't been sure. She had worked tirelessly, painstakingly gathering every shred of evidence, every single piece of proof she could find. But hearing the lawyer's approval reassured her that she wasn't chasing ghosts. "This is an excellent start, Arya," the lawyer continued, his eyes scanning the pages in front of him. "With the banking statements and receipts you've provided, along with the fraudulent transfers we've discovered, you're in a strong legal position." Arya leaned forward, her heart pounding. Finally, there was light at the end of the tunnel. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, looking at her with a steady gaze. "Arya, this is a clear case of financial misconduct. Damon has siphoned money from your joint accounts without your consent, and he's used your credit to buy expensive gifts for his mistress. You are entitled to seek compensation." A wave of emotion swept over Arya. The years of betrayal, the lies, the hurt, it had all led her here. To this moment. She had been taken for granted for far too long, but now, she was reclaiming her power. "We can move forward with a civil lawsuit," the lawyer continued, "to recover the $75,000 he diverted, as well as any other marital assets he might have hidden. The credit card charges you've provided, along with the bank statements, are irrefutable. You'll get your fair share of what's been stolen from you." Arya could hardly believe it. For so long, she had felt like she was powerless. Damon had always played the victim, made her feel like everything was her fault. But now, she could see it all clearly. She wasn't the one in the wrong. He had taken from her, and now, it was time for her to take back what was rightfully hers. The lawyer paused, flipping through the rest of the documents. "The next step is to file a legal request for the bank to release more detailed statements about these transfers. We'll need proof that the funds were moved into Damon's personal accounts and used for his personal gain. Once we have that, we'll file a lawsuit for asset recovery and financial damages." Arya's heart raced as she processed his words. She had a plan now. She had a way to fight back, to make Damon pay for the years of hurt he had caused her. She wasn't just fighting for money, she was fighting for justice, for her dignity, and for her peace of mind. The lawyer looked at her. Arya, you've been through a lot, but with these documents and our strategy, we have a strong case. I believe we can make this work. He smiled slightly, his tone reassuring. We'll proceed with the lawsuit as soon as possible. Tasha, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. Arya, you've got this. No matter what happens, we're behind you. You've got the strength to do this. Arya nodded, a sense of determination settling in her chest. This was her moment. The lawyer stood up, offering his hand to both Arya and Tasha. I'll get the paperwork started immediately. We'll move forward as quickly as possible. Arya stood, shaking his hand, a quiet smile on her face. She wasn't afraid anymore. As Arya left the lawyer's office, clutching the papers that would change everything, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Damon. You think this is over? The message read, you'll regret this. I promise you that. Her stomach churned, but she didn't feel the fear she once had. She had a lawyer now. She had the truth. And Damon? He had no idea what was coming. The war for her freedom had just begun. But would he stop at nothing to break her? Hit that subscribe button, because what Damon doesn't know is about to destroy everything he's worked for. Arya stared at her phone, the screen glowing with an unexpected notification. Sabrina Moore had just sent her a friend request. The name alone caused Arya's pulse to quicken, but what struck her even more was the smug, self-assured tone in the brief message Sabrina had attached. Hey, it's Sabrina. Damon's fiancé. We're so excited about our engagement party. He's been spoiling me rotten. Can't wait for the big day. Arya felt a sharp, bitter laugh building inside her. Sabrina, the woman who had so easily stepped into Arya's life, taking the man who had promised her everything. Yet here she was, boasting on social media about her lavish gifts, clearly unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. Arya didn't rush to respond. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. Her mind raced, but this time, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. Sabrina was just another pawn in Damon's game, another naive player who didn't know she was dancing on the edge of a cliff. Arya's fingers hovered over the screen as she pondered her reply. She could feel the weight of the moment. What did she want from Sabrina? Not revenge, not a dramatic confrontation, she had already moved past that. She wanted the truth out there. She wanted Sabrina to realize the truth about the man she was so enamored with. With calculated precision, Arya typed her message. Congrats, Sabrina. But you might want to ask Damon where he got the money for all those gifts. You see, he's been using my credit cards to spoil you. You should also know that he hasn't even paid the full deposit for the engagement party you're so excited about. Asterisk asterisk. Arya's thumb hovered over the send button, but she didn't hesitate. She hit it. The message sent. The moment of truth. She set her phone down, her fingers now shaking slightly. Would Sabrina take the bait? Would she be too blinded by Damon's charm to listen to reason? A minute passed. Then, a second. No reply. Arya didn't let the silence get to her. She had made her point. She wasn't going to waste her energy on the inevitable denial Sabrina would send. No matter what came next, Arya had done enough to make sure Sabrina couldn't be fooled anymore. Just as she was about to put her phone aside, a new message popped up. Sabrina had replied, and Arya's eyes widened as she read it. Liar. Damon has more money than you think. He said the cards you gave him were his, and you're just bitter that we're getting married. Don't think you can get in the way of our happiness. You're pathetic. Arya's heart didn't race with anger. It didn't throb with rage. Instead, it hardened, like cold steel, resolute and unwavering. Sabrina, with all her delusions of grandeur, was still too wrapped up in Damon's lies to see the truth. But Arya wasn't backing down. She was done being the victim of this twisted game. And now, it was time for Sabrina to learn. Arya quickly replied, her fingers flying over the screen. Really? You think I'm bitter? It's hilarious how you're so blinded by him. Do you even know that he used my credit cards to buy you a $3,500 handbag? Or that the $75,000 engagement party you're so excited about is going to be cancelled because Damon couldn't even come up with the full deposit? He's been lying to you just like he lied to me. The words hung in the air, their weight settling in her chest. Was it enough to shatter Sabrina's illusions? Arya waited. Seconds turned into minutes. Her phone vibrated again. Sabrina had responded. You're crazy. He told me everything about you. He said you were just a bitter woman who couldn't let go. He's moved on, and you should too. But whatever, I'm not wasting my time with you anymore. Goodbye. Arya read the message with a deep sigh. Sabrina hadn't been ready to accept the truth. She wasn't ready to see Damon for who he truly was. The man who had used Arya's loyalty for years, drained her life savings, and now intended to do the same to Sabrina. Arya felt a mixture of disappointment and a strange sense of freedom. Sabrina had been a pawn. She would realize the truth one day, but it wasn't Arya's responsibility anymore. Arya had done what she needed to do, exposed Damon's deceit for all to see. But just as Arya was about to close the conversation, another message popped up. This one was from Damon. You think I don't know what you're doing? You're messing with the wrong person. You're going to regret crossing me. You'll never see a dime of what you're trying to steal. I'll make sure of it. Arya felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Damon had been playing this game for far too long. But now, the tables had turned. She wasn't afraid anymore. With a slow, deliberate breath, Arya typed her reply. You can threaten me all you want, Damon, but I'm done being afraid. This time, you won't get away with it. No more lies, no more stealing. The truth is out, and I'm going to take everything you've tried to rob me of. She hit send. The message was final. The gauntlet had been thrown down. Arya didn't know what Damon's next move would be, but she was ready for whatever came next. Because she wasn't the woman she had been years ago. She wasn't going to shrink into the shadows and let him walk all over her. No more. Arya closed her phone with a deep sigh, her heart steadier than it had ever been. She was ready for the fight that was coming, and this time, she wouldn't lose. But as Arya looked out the window, the weight of the message still hanging in the air, she felt something she hadn't expected. Damon was done playing games. He was going to retaliate. The war was just beginning, and Arya was determined to win. What will happen next? Will Damon go too far this time? Hit that subscribe button now, because you don't want to miss the next chapter in this battle. Arya's not backing down, but will she lose everything in the process? Only time will tell. The grand ballroom glittered with extravagance, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. Laughter and soft chatter filled the air, as glasses of champagne clinked and appetizers were passed around. Arya stood at the entrance, her lawyer by her side, surveying the scene. It was all so perfect, so carefully staged. Damon had always known how to play the part of the successful, charming businessman. But tonight, it was time to expose the cracks in his perfect facade. Arya's heart pounded in her chest, but this time, it wasn't fear that gripped her, it was determination. She had spent too many years living in his shadow, too many years silenced by his manipulation. She was done being the woman left behind, the one who forgave and forgot. This was her moment of reclaiming everything. The moment Damon spotted her, a flicker of panic flashed across his face before he masked it with a forced smile. His fiancée, Sabrina, stood beside him, looking just as radiant as he had described her in his lies. Arya locked eyes with Damon across the room, and without saying a word, she began walking toward him, her heels clicking against the marble floor with every step. The room seemed to fall silent. People turned their heads, some curious, others uncomfortable with the tension that suddenly filled the air. When she reached him, Arya stood tall, her posture firm and unyielding. She could feel the weight of the crowd's attention, but she didn't flinch. Her lawyer was beside her, calm and professional, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Damon tried to smile, but it was a brittle thing. Arya, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice steady but with an edge of unease. He had never expected her to confront him like this. I'm here to tell the truth, Damon, Arya replied, her voice clear and resolute. The words seemed to hang in the air, drawing everyone's attention. Guests began whispering to each other, the buzz of gossip spreading like wildfire. You see, this whole fairy tale you've been telling everyone about your wealth? It's a lie. Arya's eyes never left his. The money you've been using to spoil Sabrina? It's my money, Damon. Money you've been using without permission. And that lavish engagement party you've thrown tonight? You couldn't even pay the deposit for it. I paid it for you. The room fell into stunned silence. Sabrina's smile faltered, her hand tightening around Damon's arm. Don't listen to her, Damon snapped, trying to regain control. She's just bitter. Arya didn't let him finish. No, Damon, she interrupted. You are the one who's been bitter. Bitter about having to keep up appearances. Bitter about pretending to be the man you're not. She turned her gaze to the guests, her voice gaining strength with every word. You've deceived everyone in this room, from your closest friends to your business associates. I've been in this relationship for years, and I watched as you manipulated me, used me, and then discarded me. Damon's face turned red, his jaw clenched. His perfect world was slipping away, piece by piece. The people who had once admired him, the friends who had praised him for his success, were beginning to look at him with doubt in their eyes. Arya could see the cracks in his carefully constructed image. I've got the proof, Damon, she continued. The receipts, the bank statements, the transfers. Everything you've done to me, everything you've taken from me, is right here in black and white. She pulled out the thick folder from her bag and handed it to her lawyer. He opened it, showing the papers to those closest to them, who began murmuring amongst themselves. The truth was out. Damon's empire of lies was crumbling before his eyes. Sabrina took a step back, her face pale. You didn't? Her voice wavered, and for the first time, Arya saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Sabrina had been living in a dream, and now the truth had shattered it. Damon's attempts to salvage the situation were feeble. This is a setup. Don't believe her, he shouted, his voice rising in panic. But it was too late. The damage had been done. His lies had been exposed, and the people who had once stood by him were beginning to ask questions. Damon, Arya said softly, her gaze unrelenting. You've been living in a fantasy, but the truth always comes to light. The party is a lie. The money is a lie. And you, she paused, locking eyes with him, you are a liar. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Arya could feel the weight of everyone's judgment on Damon. The guilt was written all over his face. And for the first time in years, Arya felt a sense of relief. The truth was out, and Damon couldn't run from it anymore. But just as she turned to leave, Damon reached out, his hand grabbing her arm. His voice was low, shaking. This isn't over, Arya. You'll regret this. Arya pulled her arm free, her gaze cold. No, Damon. You will regret ever thinking you could control me. As she walked away, she could hear the murmurs behind her, the whispers of shock, betrayal, and disbelief. The truth had set her free. And now, Damon's world was falling apart, just like he had once done to hers. But just as Arya stepped into the hallway, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't over yet. Damon wasn't done, and his next move would push Arya into a corner she couldn't escape from. What will happen next? Will Arya's victory be short-lived? Subscribe now and stay tuned for the next chapter, because the battle is far from over. Damon is about to play his final card, and this time, it could cost Arya everything. The grand ballroom, once alive with the energy of an elegant celebration, now stood in stunned silence. The guests, once eager to indulge in the opulence of Damon's engagement party, began to stir uncomfortably. Whispers floated through the air like smoke, and one by one, the guests made their exits. Some did so with quiet dignity, others with barely contained disgust. It wasn't long before the once bustling room was nearly empty, the lavish decorations now seeming like a cruel mockery of the life Damon had promised. Arya watched from the side, her heart racing with a mix of satisfaction and vindication. She had done it, she had exposed him. The years of manipulation, the constant belittling, the lying, it all came crashing down in this single moment. Damon's empire of lies was crumbling before his eyes. Sabrina stood frozen beside him, her once pristine face now a mask of humiliation. Her engagement ring, sparkling so brightly earlier in the evening, now seemed like an empty symbol, a reminder of her naivety and the man who had deceived her. It wasn't just Damon who had been playing a game, Sabrina, too, had been an unwitting pawn in this twisted game of power and deceit. Arya couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. It wasn't a smile of cruelty, it was a smile of liberation. She had spent years feeling small, silenced by Damon's control. But tonight, she was reclaiming her power. She had fought back, and won. Damon, however, was not going down without a fight. He turned to Sabrina, his voice rising in panic, trying to salvage the last remnants of his reputation. "This is just a misunderstanding," he insisted, his eyes darting nervously as he attempted to maintain control. "People will understand. They always do. I've built this life, Sabrina." But Sabrina's face, once full of hope and admiration for him, now twisted in disbelief. The illusion shattered before her eyes. She had been the one to believe in the fairy tale, the one who thought Damon was her knight in shining armor. And now, the truth hung heavily between them. "You've lied to me," Sabrina whispered, her voice shaking. "All this time, you've lied." Damon's face flushed with a mixture of anger and desperation. "It's not what you think." His voice cracked as he reached for her hand, but Sabrina pulled it away, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said, her voice trembling. It was the final nail in the coffin for Damon's reputation. His once infallible image, built on lies and deception, had crumbled like dust in the wind. As the last of the guests filed out, Damon's panic grew. He stood in the middle of the room, his once charming demeanor now completely shattered, his business associates, friends, and acquaintances all gone. All his connections, his power, his influence, they were slipping away. Arya stood back, watching it all unfold. She could almost feel the weight of the years of pain lift off her shoulders. For too long, she had been the one blamed, the one pushed aside. But now she was the one in control. Damon turned back to her, eyes wild with rage and desperation. "This isn't over, Arya. You'll regret this. You've ruined everything." Arya didn't flinch. Instead, she walked toward him slowly, her heels clicking against the floor like a steady drumbeat, each step bringing her closer to her victory. She had no intention of backing down now. "No, Damon," she said, her voice calm, but with a sharp edge. "You ruined everything long before I ever stepped into this room." She paused for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "You've been lying to me for years. And now, you have to face the consequences of those lies." Damon opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. His words caught in his throat as he realized the depth of his defeat. Sabrina, still standing beside him, seemed to shrink into herself. The weight of the truth was too much for her to bear. She had built her world around Damon, and now it was all crashing down. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she followed the last of the guests out of the door. Arya stood alone in the middle of the room with Damon, the silence stretching between them like an unbearable tension. It was clear now, Damon had lost. The engagement party, which had been meant to celebrate his new life with Sabrina, had ended in complete and utter humiliation. Damon's reputation, once polished and pristine, was now tarnished beyond repair. No amount of money, no number of guests, no grand gestures could erase the truth that Arya had exposed. As Arya made her way toward the door, she couldn't help but feel a sense of closure wash over her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had fought for. She had broken free from his grip, exposed his lies, and reclaimed her power. But just as Arya reached the door, Damon's voice called out to her one last time, low and dangerous. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. "But you've only just started to see what I'm capable of." Arya turned, her face cold and determined. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. What will Damon do next? Will he fight back in ways Arya can't anticipate? Subscribe now to stay in the loop, because the battle is far from over. The next move Damon makes could change everything for Arya, forever. The phone rang late that evening, its sharp tone cutting through the stillness of Arya's apartment. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, hesitant but knowing exactly who it was. Damon's name flashed across the caller ID, and Arya felt her pulse quicken, a familiar knot of anger twisting in her stomach. But this time, she was ready. Arya had spent too long being manipulated, too long tiptoeing around Damon's demands and threats. He had ruined her life, stolen her confidence, and treated her like a possession. Now, he was about to face the consequences of his actions. She swiped the screen to answer, her voice calm but firm. "Yes?" Damon's voice came through the speaker, dripping with venom and malice. "You think you've won, Arya? You think this is over?" You've made a huge mistake. You've messed with the wrong person. Arya could hear the desperation in his tone. He was angry, but more than that, he was scared. His empire of lies and manipulation was crumbling, and he knew it. The foundation that had allowed him to control her, and everyone else around him, was about to collapse. I didn't make a mistake, Damon, Arya said evenly, her voice steady as she reached for the recorder. You did. She pressed play. The phone crackled with the sound of Damon's previous threats, the very ones he had made months ago when he had promised that she would never get away from him. His threats were like poison, dangerous, chilling, but now, they would be his downfall. You really thought I wouldn't keep that recording? Arya said, her words slicing through the tension like a knife. Damon's bluff was over. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Arya could almost feel him scrambling for a way out, his mind racing as he processed the reality of what she had just done. The power dynamic had shifted completely. You're insane, Arya, Damon finally said, his voice unrecognizable, strained and defeated. You'll regret this. I can make this go away. I can pay you off. A small compensation for all the trouble. Let's settle this quietly, no need for all this mess. Small compensation? Arya's lips curled into a bitter smile. It was the same old Damon, attempting to manipulate, to buy his way out of the consequences of his actions. He didn't understand. She wasn't for sale anymore. Don't insult me, Damon, she replied, her voice unwavering. I'm not interested in your money or your empty promises. You've already taken everything from me, my trust, my peace of mind, my dignity. But you'll never have the chance to do that again. On the other end of the line, Damon's frustration was palpable. You think you've got the upper hand, huh? You think you're the one who holds the power now? Arya took a deep breath, letting the calmness wash over her. She had nothing left to lose, but everything to gain. This was her moment to finally take back the control she had given away for so long. No, Damon, she said quietly. You've lost. And I've finally found my voice. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Arya could almost hear Damon's mind working, trying to find a new angle, a new way to manipulate her into submission. But it was too late. The truth had been laid bare. There was no going back. You can keep your compensation. You can keep everything you think you own, Arya continued, her words a quiet but firm declaration of victory. I'm done with you. And just like that, Damon's last attempt at control slipped through his fingers. He didn't respond immediately. For a moment, there was only the sound of his breathing, sharp, heavy. Then, he spoke again, his voice colder this time, almost resigned. This isn't over. You can't run from me forever. Arya felt a cold shiver run down her spine, but she didn't flinch. The stakes had been raised, and she had already won. There was no turning back now. Yes, Damon, Arya said, her voice steady and unwavering. This is over. And you're not going to win this time. With that, she ended the call, her finger swiping across the screen. The silence that followed was deafening, but for the first time in a long time, it was a silence filled with hope. Arya sank back into the couch, her heart still racing. The war was far from over. Damon wouldn't give up that easily. But tonight, for the first time in years, she had won. And no matter what he threw at her next, she was ready. But as Arya sat there, the phone ringing again, she knew the game wasn't over. Damon wasn't the type to give up easily, and if he was calling again, it meant one thing: he had a new plan. What was he going to try now? Was his threat just the beginning of something much darker? Arya had taken the first step toward justice, but would it be enough? Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now, because the final showdown with Damon is about to begin. The truth might be on Arya's side, but there's still one question left. How far will Damon go to keep his secrets hidden? The phone call came early, the bright chime of her phone pulling Arya out of her restless sleep. She reached over, fumbling for the device, her heart still heavy from the tumultuous days that had passed. She had hoped for a reprieve from the constant stress, but she knew that this moment, this final piece of the puzzle, was what she had been waiting for. It was her lawyer, and the news that followed would change everything. Arya, we've done it, her lawyer's voice came through, crisp and clear. The court has ruled in your favor. Damon will have to pay back the stolen funds and split the marital assets according to the law. You've won. A wave of relief swept over her. The battle was finally over. Damon's manipulation, the lies, the years of control, they no longer held power over her. The court had seen through it all. But the truth wasn't just in the victory. It was in the freedom that followed. Arya sank back into her pillow, taking a moment to absorb the weight of the news. She had always feared that this day would never come, that the system would favor the wealthy and leave her with nothing but memories of what had been taken. But today, she had proof that the truth could still win. A new chapter was about to begin, and the past, the chains that had kept her tethered, no longer had a grip on her. But the victory didn't stop there. There was something more. As she hung up the phone, Arya noticed another notification blinking on her screen. It was from Zuri. Arya hadn't heard from her friend in a while, but they had kept in touch, their bond a steady source of support during the darkest days. She opened the message, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, Arya," Zuri's message began, her words warm and inviting. "I've got an opportunity for you. There's a managerial position open at an organic market. I think you'd be perfect for it. They're offering a solid salary, and it's time for you to step into something new, something you deserve." Arya's fingers shook slightly as she read the message, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. A new job? A fresh start? It seemed too good to be true, but it felt like the universe was finally answering her prayers. A job at an organic market. A managerial position. It wasn't just a career move, it was Arya's new beginning. For so long, she had felt trapped, her identity swallowed by Damon's influence, her potential wasted on supporting his lies. But now, she had a chance to carve out a life for herself, to build something from the ground up, something that was hers and hers alone. Without hesitation, she called Zuri back, the joy in her voice unmistakable. "I'll take it. I'm ready for this." The call ended, and Arya's world shifted. The weight that had been crushing her chest for so long began to lift, and she stood taller in that moment. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to shape. Arya spent the rest of the day in a haze of excitement. The court victory felt like a distant memory in the face of this new opportunity. She went through the motions of her morning routine, but this time, the reflection in the mirror wasn't the woman who had been crushed by heartbreak. No, this time, the reflection was of someone strong, someone ready to take on the world. As she stepped into her car, ready to head to the market for her interview, she allowed herself one moment of reflection. She was no longer the woman defined by her past, by Damon's betrayal. She was Arya Wells, independent, strong, and in control of her own future. The road ahead wouldn't be without challenges. There would be days when she would doubt herself, when the scars of the past would resurface. But she knew now, she was capable. She was worthy of success, love, and happiness. She didn't need anyone to validate her anymore. As the car pulled out of the driveway, Arya took a deep breath, feeling the wind rush through the open window. This was the first step toward her new life. But as Arya drove toward her new beginning, she couldn't shake the nagging thought in the back of her mind, was Damon really done? Would he let her go quietly, or was he still plotting his next move from the shadows? As Arya's new life began to unfold, Damon's shadow still loomed over her, but this time, she had the power to face it head-on. What will happen when Damon realizes that Arya isn't the woman he can control anymore? If you want to know what happens next, subscribe now, because this story is far from over. The real fight for freedom has just begun, and the worst may be yet to come. Arya's journey is just beginning, but she's already taken control of her future. Will Damon be able to shake her new foundation? Or will Arya find the strength to rise above it all? Subscribe now to follow her journey to freedom, and find out what happens next. The phone call came early, the bright chime of her phone pulling Arya out of her restless sleep. She reached over, fumbling for the device, her heart still heavy from the tumultuous days that had passed. She had hoped for a reprieve from the constant stress, but she knew that this moment, this final piece of the puzzle, was what she had been waiting for. It was her lawyer, and the news that followed would change everything. "Arya, we've done it," her lawyer's voice came through, crisp and clear. "The court has ruled in your favor. Damon will have to pay back the stolen funds and split the marital assets according to the law. You've won." A wave of relief swept over her. The battle was finally over. Damon's manipulation, the lies, the years of control, they no longer held power over her. The court had seen through it all. But the truth wasn't just in the victory. It was in the freedom that followed. Arya sank back into her pillow, taking a moment to absorb the weight of the news. She had always feared that this day would never come, that the system would favor the wealthy and leave her with nothing but memories of what had been taken. But today, she had proof that the truth could still win. A new chapter was about to begin, and the past, the chains that had kept her tethered, no longer had a grip on her. But the victory didn't stop there. There was something more. As she hung up the phone, Arya noticed another notification blinking on her screen. It was from Zuri. Arya hadn't heard from her friend in a while, but they had kept in touch, their bond a steady source of support during the darkest days. She opened the message, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, Arya," Zuri's message began, her words warm and inviting. "I've got an opportunity for you. There's a managerial position open at an organic market. I think you'd be perfect for it. They're offering a solid salary, and it's time for you to step into something new, something you deserve." Arya's fingers shook slightly as she read the message, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. A new job? A fresh start? It seemed too good to be true, but it felt like the universe was finally answering her prayers. A job at an organic market. A managerial position. It wasn't just a career move, it was Arya's new beginning. For so long, she had felt trapped, her identity swallowed by Damon's influence, her potential wasted on supporting his lies. But now, she had a chance to carve out a life for herself, to build something from the ground up, something that was hers and hers alone. Without hesitation, she called Zuri back, the joy in her voice unmistakable. "I'll take it. I'm ready for this." The call ended, and Arya's world shifted. The weight that had been crushing her chest for so long began to lift, and she stood taller in that moment. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to shape. Arya spent the rest of the day in a haze of excitement. The court victory felt like a distant memory in the face of this new opportunity. She went through the motions of her morning routine, but this time, the reflection in the mirror wasn't the woman who had been crushed by heartbreak. No, this time, the reflection was of someone strong, someone ready to take on the world. As she stepped into her car, ready to head to the market for her interview, she allowed herself one moment of reflection. She was no longer the woman defined by her past, by Damon's betrayal. She was Arya Wells, independent, strong, and in control of her own future. The road ahead wouldn't be without challenges. There would be days when she would doubt herself, when the scars of the past would resurface. But she knew now, she was capable. She was worthy of success, love, and happiness. She didn't need anyone to validate her anymore. As the car pulled out of the driveway, Arya took a deep breath, feeling the wind rush through the open window. This was the first step toward her new life. But as Arya drove toward her new beginning, she couldn't shake the nagging thought in the back of her mind, was Damon really done? Would he let her go quietly, or was he still plotting his next move from the shadows? As Arya's new life began to unfold, Damon's shadow still loomed over her, but this time, she had the power to face it head-on. What will happen when Damon realizes that Arya isn't the woman he can control anymore? If you want to know what happens next, subscribe now, because this story is far from over. The real fight for freedom has just begun, and the worst may be yet to come.